I'm not saying that today's podcast is going to change the world, but it's going to make you see the world differently after this conversation. That's a bit of a teaser. I'll explain why. Not only do I have Ethan Baehrend from Creative 3D Technologies, which his business, his vision is pretty big, and it means a lot for businesses, particularly small, mid-sized manufacturers, even large manufacturers across all sectors. You'll understand more what I'm talking about as we get into it. Ethan, good to see you, my man. Did I probably already butchered your last name though. I have a feeling so set it straight. Say it for us the right way.
Sure, Ethan Baehrend. The last name, my family stories, it got screwed up somewhere on when the family was moving over from the European side. But no, thank you for having me, and excited to be here.
Baehrend.
Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
I see. That's not that hard. It's not that hard. Okay.
Just spelled a little weird.
It's spelled a little bit weird. Mm-hmm. This is, I'm telling you, what you're attempting to do, I think, is it's visionary. I want to tie this into a historical story that you may or may not know, but I want to read people a little bit of what you have, really just kind of on your own LinkedIn profile, kind of how you describe your vision for Creative 3D Technologies, really searching for that decentralized manufacturing for small businesses, finding a way to allow companies to have rapid prototyping, creating sustainable automotive production parts. What if we could create next-gen semiconductors, fabricate it right there on site? We're talking about complete supply chain disruption. And when I discovered what you were doing and how you're attempting to do it, you're doing it through 3D printing, are you not?
Yeah, 3D printing and the conjunction or intersection of a lot of other technologies in addition to it. So thinking of manufacturing as more a process that can be merged and combined instead of separated machine down a production line.
Exactly. Everything, if you will, we used to think of let's get everything under one roof, right? In terms of manufacturing, you're saying let's get everything in one box.
Yes, exactly.
It's like we're literally going smaller, smaller, and smaller. And I think the ramifications of a technology like this are enormous. But if anyone in manufacturing knows the deep rooted challenges they have in supply chain, right? You're basically bringing the supply chain to their own warehouse. I mean, you can create and maintain all the parts. I think it's incredible. What's the technology here? How is this developing? Give us the the overview here of this great idea you've got.
No, I appreciate it. I think the best way that someone else has described it to me, and if someone else describes it one way, that's probably one of the ways it's going to resonate with a lot of others. The way they described it was it's almost an iPhone-like moment for manufacturing, where when we saw the iPhone, the smartphone start to proliferate, it was because we had a lot of the base core technologies that had fragmented in their own industries been prevalent. So we had the digital camera, we had the computer, we had the mobile telephone, all separate existing technologies. And then eventually the tech came and the innovators came that could help wrap it all up into one package and make that smartphone and then pivot to that. We think that a lot of manufacturing is in that position where the actual mechanical systems that move production tools, the speed they need to move them at, the torque, the precision they need to move them at, and all the tech that goes into the machinery itself, not necessarily the process, but the actual machines themselves, have grown to a point of, they're so consistently similar that you don't really need separate machines to do all these separate tasks. We think it's an iPhone moment where there's so many separate functions that are very much one machine does one function, one set of material for one price point a customer. And we see there's an opportunity to take all these separate systems and build them into one system that's almost overkill for the spec, can move in all the right directions, take the right inputs, and switch between a lot of production techs to make that one product. So we kind of see it as, smartphone moment for the manufacturing industry, which we're hoping to help usher in.
Yeah, and we know just how big of a revolution that was. Which industries right now are you most closely tied to?
I think it's generally a very large mix. Um, And I think that because if we look at a lot of current global events, the new presidency and how that pivots where and how people need to manufacture, if we look at historical, like or recent history, like the pandemic, the recession, or the subsequent supply chain crisis that came up from a lot of it, I think it highlighted to the globe how fragile that current supply chain is. If we don't get it from, your one named offshore, a lot of times there's not a competitive option in price or quality. And we think there's a major opportunity if you have a system that can do your metals, your plastics, your robotic assembly, your post processing, your qualifying, and do it all in one system. For a lot of products, it's not going to be the same price at offshore, but if you can at least get close, if you're in a supply chain crisis moment like that, that's going to save quite a lot of capital. But in addition to that, even though we might not be more affordable for something like a water bottle and you're trying to produce that, the more steps you're trying to use to create a final product, the more advanced that final product is, and the more steps we can do in a single machine, instead of that price point going up because you're involving more machines, more power to run them, more molds, etc. Ours does the inverse. The price point starts to go down for the more things that we can do in one box. So for a lot of complex products, multi-stage products, assemblies, things like that, it starts to get pretty competitive to the point that we're seeing a lot of, like you're saying, between small, even all the way down to like the startups and hobbies out of the garage, all the way up to some of the larger manufacturing parties in the world wanting to adopt these systems, bring them in house, and then produce for themselves. Produce a part, scan it, throw it in an item bin, and then you're not dealing with shipping product between thousands of warehouses and hoping warehouse one might not have a stock while warehouse two has it and needing to get it over, and all the complications that come with that too.
Well, you
So
want to
more
just take
on-demand
control.
production.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Right. And for those who are in automotive manufacturing who kind of play in the OEM supply chain, you could have one company that is supplying one part. And if they have an issue or their vendor's vendor has an issue, it could slow everything down. It could halt production. And I think they've gotten to the point where that doesn't happen because they have built the redundancies in there. But when this was starting up, that was definitely the case. And I do know that there were some issues with some chips. I don't know. I'm not technical enough to know exactly what the chips were and where
Mhm.
in the computer systems, but you know what I'm talking about. There were cars just stacked up waiting, for this
Yeah.
final component. Now, these boxes that you have, they're also capable of circuitry and semiconductors. It's really amazing because I think when people think 3D printing, they've seen those kind of plastic little
Mhm.
trinkets that people have been experimenting with at home. You know, I guess like a science experiment. You're talking about something on a commercial grade. So let's talk about the size and the scope. Let's make it practical though. Tell me, give me an example of a business that could use it and what kind of parts they could make and just how sophisticated we can make these. Because you told me you were doing, I don't know if you want to mention anything. You mentioned something with the government and some types of things you're building. I don't
Mhm.
want to, I don't, I don't want the black SUV vans to show up at my house. So I'll leave that to you if you want to bring that
No,
up.
no worries. It's it's very broad. Manufacturing shows. You will see, say you're trying to bend metal. You don't see specifically metal companies versus automotive companies going to the show that you're going to find the machines that bend metal. You find both companies at the same show looking for the same tech because ultimately it does the same end function. And for us, more than anything, we'll see that if we can be very adept with a material, if we can be expressly good at using that material, then it's going to be applicable for a lot of different industries. So we cover a lot of the medical spectrum materials. We cover flexibles. We cover high temperatures. We cover your fibrous and glass fibers and carbon fibers, your standard plastics, your foams, and even goes up to the metals with the current systems that we have publicly shown on market. And that alone, having that combination and being able to combine those different types of materials opens up a lot of doors already because that's, like you're mentioning, that's automotive. There's so many automotive manufacturers that you don't know what's going to roll into your shop. You don't know if it's 50 years old. You don't know if it's 5 years old, and not all the
Right.
times are those parts going to be accessible. And you shouldn't have to have, your plastic system, your 4 different metal systems, and everything to make your basic variety of parts you have to weld together to make your final piece. Instead, have the one system. So we'll see automotive, we'll see film, we'll see aerospace, we'll see defense, like you're mentioning, we'll see hobbyists at a garage making RC car parts. We'll see kind of everything in between. It is quite a large mix, but I think where I think the most demand has come from is almost a new market segment of, like we're starting to say, that on-demand supply, that need for kind of a decentralized, not just option two, but ability to produce in-house, especially given how I think turbulent these past few years have been for what everyone has had as their, for decades now, pretty established production tool chains and supply chains.
The size of does the size of the box determine really what can be made? So therefore, you're having to think, okay, how do we build a bigger box? Kind of walk me through that, because the things I've seen
Sure.
online, the boxes, are smaller. So I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around just what
Well,
this is
I'm
going to look
sitting next to
like.
one right now, actually.
I
So
can
it
see that.
ours are definitely some larger ones. It depends. So we have different SKUs. Some of what we've talked about already, and like truly autonomously combining all the separate production techs, are things that we're actually releasing in the near future versus things that we have on market now, because we want to have people be excited for what's here, but we want to ease them into the future, since there
Mm,
hasn't really been a tech that does all these separate production methods
true.
in one. So we figure, let's build a tech that can start and build a reputation in one industry, which is initially our target market of 3D printing. But like you're starting to mention, actually, hopefully later this year, if not early next, we're showing how there's a module for this tech. You can pull off, we call them tool heads, but it's a system that you can unplug basically the end tool it's doing the manufacturing, whether you're cutting, whether you're melting, whether you're picking up and placing something with robotics. That's essentially a tool, and you can switch between tools. We're showing off, like you mentioned, that semiconductor tool. So that's going to enable you to actually do the chip fab as well. That's separate, deeper topic. But in terms of systems, it depends what you're trying to make. Most of the time, and most of things that we manufacture these days are multi-stage, multi-step processes. And if you want to keep them as multi-stage, multi-step processes, as long as you can fit those individual components within the box, you can usually work with it. Otherwise, if you're okay, taking two pieces together and either welding it, gluing it, or one other method of conjoining them, then you can go larger. But otherwise, the physical footprint of the machine is your limitation, your upwards limitation of how big you can go. So we try to maximize as large as we can go with the most precision that we can fit in there without being this overly bulky box. So the unit we currently have on market, Evo, we can produce within around, it's in metric, but close to like a 3 foot by 2 foot by like 2.5 foot volume, which is generous for something that can still fit through a standard door and be put on a standard pallet without having all these crazy shipping and setup procedures, while some future units go a little larger and some future units go a little smaller. So the more advanced one that we're hoping to release, hopefully closer to 2027, is working closer to a 5 foot volume and some of the previous estimations.
But you've got a pretty big vision, and as I was thinking about what you were attempting to do, well, you are actually doing it, but you're looking at decentralizing. And I don't think people who are in the industry, I think they understand just how big a dream that is. But to decentralize and give power and independence to small businesses, it's really incredible. Um, for Christmas, my wife gave me a book, and I want to tell you this story because when I read the book, I've thought quite a bit about this man and what he was able to accomplish. But hearing your story and what it is you were trying that you're striving to do, I'm not comparing you to, but you do share a similar dream of this decentralization, if you will. There was a young boy. He was 9 years old, and he went to the Paris World Fair back in 1867, and he there were thousands of exhibitors, and he came across one by Nick, let's see, the name is Nicholas Otto. And Nicholas Otto had created the world's first internal combustible engine. And up until that time, they were all external. And this was the steam engine.
Yep.
And so where he grew up in France and kind of witnessing what his father went through working in these really treacherous manufacturing facilities, and they employed a lot of young people to work. It's just they're very, very, very challenging places. He had this dream once he saw this, and he later became an engineer. He wanted to create a decentralized, smaller, alternative energy engine. Now today, over 100 years later, everyone in the world knows this man's name. His name is Diesel. Rudolf Diesel. And I just wanted to share this because this to me was, when I heard what you were trying to accomplish, it reminded me of this incredible story of what this man was attempting to accomplish. And he disappeared back in 1913. So if you like
wow.
if you love a good historical fiction, I recommend this. And I think you
Sure.
might find a lot of your big dreams of bringing that power to the small businesses. This has been a dream that people have had. It's remarkable. I was like, wow, this is what Ethan is trying to accomplish. So Ethan, like I say, I'm not comparing you with Rudolf Diesel, but I am saying you did. I mean, maybe one day this thing will be as prolific as that. But talk a little bit about your distribution now. Talk a little bit about where you are, where you can be found, maybe how people can find you. I think it's fascinating, honestly.
Sure. Yeah. In terms, I guess, where we're at personally and as a business, it's been a long R&D journey. I mean, we unofficially started trying to pursue this kind of tech back in 2017, unofficially, probably even a little sooner than that too. And with this tech, we weren't actually expecting to get the results we did. I mean, we figured, and as most, I think, engineers believe, is that manufacturing is in the current fragmented machine to machine to machine style production lines as it is for good reason. And that reason is because we've perfected each of these steps and they have to be separate steps or they're just not as efficient. And the reality is that's just not the case these days. There's so many things that don't need to be separate. And in pursuing making a bigger, better manufacturing system, because we were just trying to perfect 3D printing technology, as that was a lot of my background and the other folks working here, we started realizing how many areas there were of overlap and improvement that if we push a little further beyond, if we went for more precision, a little more robustness, that not only can we do the printing, we can do these entirely separate functions, which from a business standpoint looks good because you're talking about milling markets and printing markets and pick and place, and are all more and more opportunities for the business. But the way I see it is it's also opportunities for the end user. I mean, there's a real truth that every single large manufacturing renaissance that we've had has been driven by the ability to make something new. Like what you're mentioning, when both the steam engines and the combustion engines came out, there's a whole push on, okay, we can do this, this, and this now more efficiently, effectively, and it opened up possibilities that were behind closed doors. These systems, because in a lot of senses, they very literally add another dimension of production. We see the future is creating different techs that weren't even possible before, and adding new dimension, adding potential to a lot of these projects, which gets us excited. But I digress. Right now, we're trying to ease people into that tech. Again, I think all the folks that would even consider a system like this are very used to one machine does one function, one software, and one set of materials. And one system even doing a couple functions is still quite a jump, much less what we initially made was a system that automatically went between 20 different production techs and actually made a pretty interesting autonomous vehicle technology at the time to prove it out, and made these full systems in one box. But ease people into it. That's why we have Evo. That's why the first video you see on our website, if you go to creative3technologies.com, is showing someone how you can not only open a system and do all the 3D printing text, but switch between and do different production techs in the same box, because Evo is the system we're hoping people can get used to it with. That with something that's a little more familiar. So that's what we have in market right now. We're based in Austin, Texas, expanding. It's still in the Central Texas area next year, and so we're limited output since you don't go from years R&D to thousands a month. You do a couple break even, and we've done so some very exciting clients and some big names out there. And so now it's at the point of scaling up and hoping to get more out there, since we've definitely gotten some orders that come in that we just can't meet at the moment without scaling things up a bit here. So it's growing pains, but it's definitely a good position to be in here.
Great position to be in, and I'm really thrilled that I kind of caught you on this side of your journey, of the ramp up. And I think you're right. I do think you introduce new tech, and it's change management. It's having to rethink, old modes and modals of this is how we think, this is how we operate.
Mm-hmm.
You go into any manufacturing operation, and it's line by line by line by line. It's just not been created like this. There are new technologies with robotics that are attempting to create these single stations that you're essentially referring to. Basically, you're putting a single, multiple
Yep.
functions right into one box, which would become a single station. I've seen this happening now with robotics, where the robots would bring into a single worker's area, multiple processes to do something, rather than the machine, the product having to go down the line, different people
Yep.
work on it, one person, one group. So I think it's definitely trending in that direction. So I don't think you're going to be totally a
Hoping
salmon,
so.
swimming upstream.
And if we look at current market dynamic, it's a yes and no. I mean, there's not an incentive for traditional machinery manufacturer to make this kind of tech. And I've even spoken about this at United Nations conference of parties, and I've been around kind of speaking on this, where if we look historically, most manufacturing hasn't changed substantially in the past 3 to 5 decades. Relatively the same technology, relatively the same back end, and it's been incremental improvements. It's been slightly faster or automated, going from one station to another. But the reality is, again, there's so many steps that are separate that actually could have been combined into one system years ago, but don't, because this one player is dominant in this one function, this other player is dominant in this other, and if they overlap each other, it's pointless conflict when a customer, they're stuck with that one machinery supplier anyway, because again, one system, one function, one budget. You have one manufacturer a lot of times per budget, and a lot of times there's not overlap, especially on the industrial end of, well, if you can get that same system for anyone else. So it's almost, you're locked in and forced to keep buying those systems over the years, and anything that starts to breach that gap is competing on a lot of fronts, and we realize that too. But we also think that's the point, and that's a necessary step, because like we were mentioning, there's physical shapes that you can produce that would otherwise be impossible if you have those be separate machines. I mean, we've taken like 50, or the most extreme example, like we took a 50 plus part autonomous vehicle assembly, and instead of having 50 parts, needing to factor in the assembly of all of them, the molds of all of them, and bring them all together, we did it in one cohesive piece. I am printed, milled, picked up, dropped, wired, assembled, everything literally in one final piece you just plug in and be done with. And those are literal dimensions that a lot of people didn't think in or even design in, because the tech wasn't there to make it. So it's opening the door for hopefully a new era of products that are more efficient, more effective, less material intensive, and better at that initial function than the original idea too.
I think we're at the beginning of something special, and I'm glad we have found something that's not necessarily AI. I think people just are kind of rolling their eyes about that. This is hands-on, practical innovation that can happen right there in your manufacturing facility. Look, I'm excited. I'm really glad we had a chance to meet. I'm really glad that we're able to kind of get your story out to the business world. And I definitely encourage folks to have a conversation with you and figure out how can they start implementing and building their redundancy into their supply chain, or just adding this extra step, I think, of security into their processes.
Yeah, absolutely. We welcome those conversations too. It's easy to reach out and find us. A lot of what we have is a little more private than public, but if someone talks to us directly, it's fine to share a lot of it. So no problems at all
Absolutely.
there.
That's great. And no black SUVs will show up.
Nope. No, like I said, more than anything, we're just trying to ease folks into it. I think Amazon model back in the day, they built the back end to be the retailer of a lot of different industries. So they didn't start in 5 industries out the gate. They started
That's
in
true.
books, went books to CDs, CDs, movies, etc. They started in one and slowly built out and eased people into it instead of just full throttle. And it's the same thing we're trying to do. So that's the only reason why we have a longer tech lineup and easing folks into it instead of just starting with the hey, here's a crazy factory in a box, hope you buy it.
Well, I think next time what we'll do, Ethan, we'll see if we can change some camera angles and maybe we can do some live. I'd love we can maybe see some things happening. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Ethan, great talking to you. For those that had no idea, we had incredible technology challenges today. So if this recording is anything other than absolutely perfect, just know that Ethan and I were both like arm wrestling tech demons on both sides to bring this to you today. So, but we prevailed. Americans.
Absolutely.
All right. Ethan, great seeing you today, my friend.
Great seeing you. Thanks for having me on.
Great seeing you, Ethan. We'll see you next time.